What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2022 Genesis GV70. So about the all new GV70, this is the newest addition here to the Genesis lineup, and it's the smaller SUV compared to the GV80 that I reviewed earlier this year. And man, oh man, does this thing look stunning. Now this is the top 3.5T Sport Prestige trim, but I mean, all versions of the GV70 look fantastic. It's just so streamlined and smooth. It honestly gives me kind of like a modern version of like Art Deco kind of vibes with the way they styled this. I think hands down this is the most gorgeous looking crossover in this segment. No contest, easy winner here with the Genesis. It just looks so good, especially here in this mono red color. It really pops, but you know, you have those wraparound headlights there in the front, and I love how they're just so skinny and just have the LED running lights there in them. They really make a statement out on the road. And this one being the Sport also has these sportier front bumper setups here, so you have these larger air intakes on the corners, and then that signature Genesis grille they now have on these models, which is large but looks so good, especially here with the glossy black trim you get on these. I mean, it is just a stunner. You have that Genesis badge right up front there, and yeah, I just stare every time I look at this thing. It just makes me want to swoon over this styling. I mean, every time I park this thing, I want to turn around and look back at it. I mean, it is just that jaw-droppingly gorgeous in my opinion. I can't overstate it enough. And then coming down to the sides here, you have these very bold 21-inch wheels that also look super cool with this like mesh kind of theme going on in them. These wheels, by the way, are only on this top Sport Prestige version of the 3.5T and the 2.5T. All other versions of GV70s get smaller wheels that still look very nice, but don't make as much of a statement as these 21s do. Also, there's a lot of other unique stuff here to the side. So I also love how, you know, you just have a very sleek shape to the profile of this vehicle. And especially I love that C-pillar treatment. It's really unique there, the way it kind of sweeps up, and you have that very small little quarter window in the back. Might not be the best for visibility, but from the outside, I mean, it really, again, sets this vehicle apart from all of its competitors with their ho-hum usual boxy styling. I think this looks so much better. And then going out to the back, it's more of that streamlined kind of, again, Art Deco kind of vibe in the back there. You have those wraparound taillights, and then here on the Sport versions, you get those round exhaust tips as well, which are on the larger side, but again, they make a bold statement, and that's what Genesis needed to do with this vehicle to stand out from the sea of BMWs and Audis and Mercedes. They continue to do more of the same. You know, this really does stand out. I also love how you have that mesh pattern to the plastic there in the lower part of the rear bumper, and how that also wraps around the corners there, so it kind of sweeps into those exhaust tips. It's a very cool look. Everything about this vehicle is just so visually interesting, but I think the most distinctive thing is just how smoothed over and streamlined everything is. Once again, it just looks so cool. You have the Genesis branding, you know, proudly spelled out there on the back, and I think that from every single angle, this thing is a 10 out of 10, 100% perfect, gorgeous, beautiful design, and bravo Genesis, more of this please. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The Genesis GV70 here has the same great Genesis key as the other models, with this really nice satin finish on it, and some nice metal buttons here on the back. This one also does the auto park thing, so you can move it in and out of a spot with those buttons. But also, that's not the end of the story as far as the key. Of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, push button start, but even beyond that, it actually does use the phone as a key if you want. You can set it up to do that, and so that will unlock the car. And then the way that you start the vehicle with that method is this actual fingerprint scanner that you have here. You put your finger on it and it will start up the vehicle. That's also how you can enter into a valet mode. And whenever you do that, it also will remember all your settings based on your fingerprint and make sure that it has, you know, the memory seat in the right position, all that kind of stuff it can do without even having your key at all, which is super cool. But if you're a traditionalist like I am, just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button here, which is very beautiful as well, and it starts right up. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in the GV70, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so I'll link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all the details on this interior. But overall, it is very impressive. There's a lot of wow factor here, a lot of awesome technology, as well as just an abundance of luxury, even more so than what you get in a lot of other competing vehicles. Everything just smells nice. Everything is covered in leather or metal. Everything is just so impressive on this interior, but definitely check out that video for all the details on how this interior is. Alright, so setting off here in the GV70. Well, I've been very excited to drive this car this year. It's on the same platform as the G70, which I love dearly as far as its handling dynamics and just the sheer value you get with the G70. And so, yeah, I'm excited to try this out here. But as far as the usual stuff here with the GV70, visibility, very good. You have a very good view forward, nice thin A-pillars, mirrors off onto the doors, nice little window there at the A-pillar. So very easy to see forward. View out of the back is also actually really good, even though there's a little more of a slope to that rear hatch. Just a nice large rear window there. Another thing I really have been impressed by is just the smoothness of the ride. So the GV70s here, at least in these higher trims, have this road preview adaptive suspension. So it'll actually use the cameras that it uses for the adaptive cruise control and stuff to scan the road for imperfections and preload the suspension to perfectly soak up those bumps. Now, obviously it has limitations. It's not like you're in a magic carpet ride here or anything, but it means that, you know, it's just going to give you a very smooth ride, and that combined with just the insanely quiet ride this has too. I mean, I just was in an Audi Q5 not too long ago, and that was also very nice, but this is definitely markedly more quiet in my opinion. So part of it comes down to the double paned windows, both in the front and on the higher trims here. You even have it on the back windows, and then just everything. They must have put so much sound deadening in this vehicle, and that might be part of why this is a little bit heavier than most of its competitors. Honestly though, I mean, we'll have to wait till we get onto a back road, but I think that it's worth it just for the amount of isolation you get here in this cabin. It is almost uncanny how quiet it is when you're driving around, especially for this segment of vehicle, especially with the average, you know, Mercedes GLCs and stuff like that, still having a fair amount of road noise and wind noise and stuff. This is, I think, actually a good bit better than all the competitors as far as quietness goes. It's also very responsive to all your commands. So you have an 8-speed automatic transmission, and even just dipping into the gas a little bit immediately gives you a downshift, and throttle response is immediate. Even though this motor is turbocharged, it's twin turboed, and it's a big old V6 still too, so I mean, it's immediately going to give you some punch the second you call upon it. Brakes also really start to bite right at the top of the pedal there. I mean, you just barely touch the brake and it starts to brake, but it's not so abrupt that it's hard to be smooth with. It nicely ramps up so that you can still be smooth with it, and it's not, you know, super tricky to, you know, use. So I really love that, but I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the Sport Plus mode, which is the sportiest mode that actually turns off traction control and will also inflate the side bolsters to get the vehicle tighter here. Sport mode does that as well, but that's just a very cool feature I've always loved in these. But anyway, let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. All right. Picks up very nicely. It's a good amount of punch. It might not give you as much of a wow factor as you get from the competitors, some of which might be a little bit quicker, but this is still very punchy. So yeah, it's just a very meaty power band. Anyway, so this runs the 3.5 liter twin turbocharged V6 like other Genesis models. It does 375 horsepower, 391 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 is quoted by Genesis supposedly around 5.1 seconds is the number I saw. Some have suggested it could be closer to like 4.9 seconds, something like that. Regardless, you know, that is pretty quick, but I think like an X3 M40i will do it in about 4.5 seconds. So it might not be the fastest in a straight line in a drag race, but plenty of punch. I mean, you just ride this wave of torque that just pushes you forward in a mighty manner, and it is impressive feeling. I think it still feels very, very punchy, and there is also a launch control. Hopefully we'll see if we can try it out later, but there is a launch control you can do in Sport Plus mode, and so, you know, that'll give you a little bit of a more impressive launch if you want. It also seems to ramp up the engine noise a little bit in that Sport Plus mode. I also noticed the idle actually got higher, so I think it jumps up a couple hundred RPMs there when you're in Sport Plus mode, so it even gets those turbos a little bit more ready to go too. But we're on this road that often generates a lot of road noise. That's all you hear. It's a very subdued hum. Again, very impressive, especially considering we're on 21-inch wheels too, with little rubber band tires that really can't absorb much, and so very impressive with all that. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how this thing handles. Again, G70 platform, high expectations. Let's see how we do. Okay. Wow, the seatbelt grabbed me, and I had a little bit of squealing from those tires. But it's hanging on to gears here for me too, because it's, you know, it knows I'm in that Sport Plus mode and I mean business. And so interesting Okay, so the tires are giving up a little bit, but it works with it. So part of the reason is these tires are not super sporty. They're only Michelin Sport Touring all-season tires. They're not Michelin Pilot Sport all-season tires, or even Michelin Pilot Sport 4s or something like that. Unfortunately, there's no way to get any kind of sportier tire on these. I think that is one way that some of the competitors might be a little bit sportier. Yeah, tires are what are letting this vehicle down. So on the G70, you can actually get this Pilot Sport 4s for that better grip with the rear-wheel drive version. But since this is all-wheel drive only, I guess they assume everyone wants the all-seasons. But I'd still like to see the Pilot all-season at least, instead of these Primacy Tour all-seasons. So that is the only thing letting this vehicle down. Aside from that, it feels really good. Now, you have very heavy steering. I've noticed that not only in Sport Plus mode, but even in Comfort mode. Steering is pretty heavy, and so that also kind of hinders how much the vehicle feels like it wants to dive into corners, just because I have to put more muscle into turning the wheel to actually crank it to get it to go. I wish the steering was a little bit lighter, but it still felt really good. And also in this very top Sport Prestige trim only, you get a torque vectoring rear diff that can send up to 100% of the power to one of those rear wheels to help power you out of a corner. And I'm not sure why it's only on the Prestige trim and not on the other versions of 3.5T Sports, especially the Sport ones you would think would have that. But anyway, so I think I felt that working a little bit there, and so I think that helps to maximize the somewhat meager grip you do have from these tires. It's also a fairly heavy vehicle. These weigh 4,453 pounds here in this trim with this engine and all that, and that, depending on your competitor, that is heavier no matter what. It's about 50 or so pounds heavier than a BMW X3 M40i, and then whenever you go to stuff like an Audi SQ5 and a Mercedes GLC 43, those actually are between like 200 and 250 pounds lighter. I will say I've actually driven all three of those competitors. It was a few years ago, but I have driven all of them, and I would say that probably all of them do feel a little bit lighter than this. This is definitely the heaviest of the bunch. Again, the steering doesn't help with that weighty feeling, but I think just the fact that it was a little less willing to dive in as those vehicles were is the only thing. But I honestly think if they even just put the Pilot all seasons on here, it would be so much better with the handling. I mean, it's not bad, at least on this, sportiest version. Again, if you're gonna go up to a limited slip diff and all this kind of stuff, you should upgrade tires too. That's like a major thing. Is the first thing you should upgrade is the tires if you're trying to do any kind of sportier driving. And so I'm not sure why Genesis overlooked the tires here on this, but aside from that, it handles itself very well. But let's see if we can do a quick little launch control here. I'll just brake torque it. It's still pretty quick. Yeah, it didn't give me any notification that launch control is active, so maybe I did something wrong. But with a brake torque launch, it's still punchy, but I can kind of tell this engine feels like it's more tuned to being a luxury engine than it is a performance, powerhouse or anything like that. I mean, it's certainly, again, plenty punchy. It matches all the competitors on specs and stuff. Sometimes even actually exceeds some of the competitors with specs, but yeah, I mean, it rips really well. It just doesn't feel quite as eager. Again, maybe that's the weight holding it back a little bit. I also think it might just be the tuning. This 8-speed automatic too does a really good job, but I feel like maybe the gears are a little too widely spaced out or something, so that it's there's long strides to each gear before it really does start to rip. I'd like to see maybe some shorter gearing to maybe give you a little bit of a more intense experience here. Again, maybe only in the Sport Prestige trim with the LSD or something. Also, there's no dedicated manual mode, but you can play with the paddle shifters here to put it and force it into a manual mode here. So try that out. A little bit delayed. Downshifts are decent. I mean, if you're familiar with any other Hyundai, Kia, or Genesis product with this 8-speed automatic that they build in-house, it's the same thing. It's the same kind of shift speeds you get in a Stinger, G70, anything like that. They're all pretty much the same. I mean, it's a fine shifting automatic. It's just not as good as the ZF 8-speed, but it's better than your average run-of-the-mill automatic as well. So I think it's pretty good. I honestly, though, have to say, like, even in a regular Audi Q5 with the DSG, that has snappier manual shifts. Again, I don't know how many people are doing manual shifting in a GV70, but just wanted to mention, since this is the sportiest version, if you are someone who wants to use those, just keep in mind that probably won't be quite as responsive as you might be wanting, but they work, especially if you just want to do a couple little shifts here and there. Should be totally fine. Oh man, this thing's actually a little bit tail happy, and almost like it definitely has a rear bias setup to it. And you actually get a little bit of a turbo hiss too. It's not any kind of wastegate sound or anything, but you get like you can actually hear the exhaust a little bit here in this. Now that is another area though where this does fall behind some of the competitors. The GLC43 and the X3 M40i in particular sound fantastic. They crackle and pop and bang and do all the fun things. This doesn't do any of that. So that is one area where I wish they did, you know, a little bit of work there. I'm not sure if it has an active exhaust. I know that's something they added to the G70 for 2022, but even the active exhaust in that was underwhelming. Again, they know how to do awesome exhaust. They do it in the Veloster end, the Elantra end, all those end products have those crackles and pops from the exhaust. I get it, this is luxurious and stuff, but that hasn't stopped BMW and Mercedes from still having those insane exhausts. So maybe they're wanting to go a little classier with this, I don't know. But I personally would say, again, if you're going for the Sport Prestige and you want the absolute craziest performance with the LSD and stuff, give everyone the crazy exhaust too, and maybe reserve for that trim or something, or do some other hardcore version down the road or something like that. But you know, it does turn in nicely though. It's just, again, those tires immediately start to protest. If you had good grip on this thing, I think it would be a lot more dynamic and, you know, it'd be even more rewarding to push in corners. Because I don't think really the weight holds it back a whole lot. It's just, again, lighten up the steering a little bit, put better tires on it, and this thing, I think it would do wonders for the handling of this thing. But as it is already, like I said, very, very good handling. And now we're back in comfort mode, just cruising behind traffic here. And this road does have a decent amount of potholes, so I wanted to try this road preview thing. I'm actually deliberately hitting the potholes. And I mean, it soaks them up very well. Again, 21-inch wheels with little rubber band tires. There's only so much you can do, but honestly, this is a very smooth ride. I mean, it's very, very well done with that adaptive suspension. I will say, you know, yeah, it might feel a little softer here in comfort mode, but this adaptive suspension Genesis doesn't do any kind of wild differences. I commented on the same thing in the G70 with that adaptive suspension where, you know, yeah, it's softer here in comfort and it is a little bit firmer here in Sport Plus mode. I'll even, just for kicks, I'll go back up into Sport Plus mode and hit some potholes. You do feel them. They come through the cabin a little bit more. You get that immediate stiffness there, but it's not unrefined in either mode. So you could daily drive this thing in Sport Plus, and I think honestly you'd still have a smoother ride than what you get in the GLC43. That thing almost felt like it wanted to knock my fillings out of my teeth with how stiff the ride can be sometimes in that GLC43. This is a lot more polished and smooth. So, you know, I think the consensus I'm kind of coming to so far initially here with the GV70 is that this is kind of a little bit of a happy medium. It gives you all the power and a lot of the performance of, you know, those German rivals with their performance variants, but I think it actually gives you a little bit of a smoother ride than most of those, a little bit more polished, like I said, more sound deadening than all of those, and also the transmission's, I think, smoother. So, you know, if you want those snappy shifts, go for it. And I think the BMW does a really good job of straddling both smoothness and the snappiness. But the GLC43 actually had really rough shifts sometimes, especially in manual mode was very rough. That transmission isn't great in the Mercedes. So, you know, I think the Mercedes is kind of like the more raw, rough around the edges one, if that's what you're going for. But I think that this is really polished. It is tough to fault the X3 M40i though. I was so impressed with that because it had the sound, it had the great transmission, still had the smoothness. It's just that, you know, the X3 might not stand out from the crowd as much as this does and stuff. And I'll get more into the competitors later in the video here. But, you know, as far as, you know, I think this is hands down a better experience than the GLC. Again, unless you're doing full attack on a back road and, you know, need the most violent experience possible. But aside from that, you know, I think that this is going to be my preference over a GLC 43. SQ5 also is a little more watered down, I think, than the BMW and the Mercedes, and I think it kind of is more close to this in its feel. I'd say this actually feels a little bit sharper because the SQ5 that I reviewed actually had a decent throttle delay that I didn't love, and just felt maybe a little more relaxed than I would like. So this might be more in line with that. I have to drive a newer SQ5 to compare it, because the last one I did, I believe, was like a 2018 model. But, you know, now we're just merging onto the highway here, and it's just effortless, buttery smooth power here. Another thing I really like about merging onto the highway here is that you have this blind view monitor, which is something that the Genesis models and even some Hyundais and Kias have, where it'll actually show you an image of what's in your blind spot there when you have your turn signal on. I really love that feature. But we'll go ahead and put on the Highway Drive Assist. This has Highway Drive Assist 2.0, which is the newest version here, which actually will do automated lane changes in addition to doing the lane keeping assist and the normal adaptive cruise control stuff. And it also does do machine learning here with the 2.0 version. So it'll actually learn your driving style. You can also set up exactly how you want it to react, with how aggressive you want it to, accelerate and slow down and, help you with everything. But it also will supposedly use machine learning to figure out, how to more closely drive like how you drive out on the highway when the system is on. So I have it on right now. It is a hands-on system still, of course. So you still have to, keep your hands on the wheel. And seems to be doing a pretty good job of staying in the lanes there. It kind of got a little close to the line and then brought itself back in. These road lines are a little tricky with the sunlight right now, but it still seems to be doing a pretty good job here. Highway Drive Assist, I haven't loved it in the past because in other models it makes me pretty nervous. But this 2.0 version is supposed to be improved. And I have tested the same version on a GV80 and stuff, and it wasn't perfect in that either. This is pretty good. It's doing an okay job. I still think Volvo has a better system, where their system is a little more confidence inspiring because it doesn't pogo, it just locks onto the lane and that's it. But yeah, like I am now currently on the shoulder and it's just letting me go. So it's still not great. It needs to be more intense with keeping you in the lanes. You cannot have the vehicle wandering like you're a drunk driver or something. So still needs work. I want to like this system, and I know a lot of other reviewers don't have any issues with it, but every single one I've tested, I just have to be honest, they're not keeping within the lanes. It's just that simple, and that's all I ask of these systems. Stay in the lanes and do not ever cross the line, because that could potentially lead to an accident. So I hope that they continue to improve this system, but as of right now, I still think you have to babysit these Highway Drive Assist systems, and obviously, again, you still have to have your hands on the wheel no matter what, but even still, I would say, you have to make sure that you are still steering and stuff and not relaxing too much. I mean, Audi isn't perfect with their lane keep assist system either. I mean, a lot of these companies are still trying to figure this out, but there are some that do it very well. Like you have, Cadillac with the Super Cruise system, which is actually a hands-free system that does an excellent job. And then you also have now even, Lincoln's going to be coming out with their Glide Drive system or whatever that they're doing, which is also the same hands-free thing. There are ways you can do this better. This one just doesn't cut it just yet. Hopefully someday it will, but for now, I would just say, it's a fantastic driving experience already. Just enjoy the drive, do it yourself, and the adaptive cruise control part itself works great. So if you just want to use that, that's fine. But the steering assist thing, I still think needs a little bit more time in the oven. But anyway, that's all my thoughts for now. But thanks to Genesis, I'm going to have the GV70 here for an entire week. So I'm going to drive around all over the place. Then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and how it compares to its competitors, and anything else I noticed during my week of driving. All right, so I've been driving the Genesis GV70 for a week now, and I love this thing. It is so nice. I mean, even just like I'm resting my head on the headrest and it's soft. Like all these little details, Genesis just nailed the details in this vehicle, and you really appreciate that whenever you have a long amount of time to kind of poke around this interior and really take it all in. I mean, just the sheer customization of everything is also really impressive, to set it up to exactly how you want, even more so than most other vehicles with these days that have their own drive modes and driver profiles. This takes it beyond anything else I've experienced in any other vehicle, and it's really cool. And I talk about that more in the interior review. But yeah, things that like jumped out at me early on, like the heavier steering, I totally got used to here during the week. It's really not that bad, especially in comfort mode here. Hands down, if I were buying a luxury crossover in this segment, this is what I would buy. And one of the main reasons is just the pricing is fantastic. But before I get to the pricing, one thing I didn't love about the GV70 is its fuel economy. It isn't great. So these are rated at 19 mpg in the city, 25 on the highway, and 21 combined. Not terrible numbers for a luxury SUV that has almost 400 horsepower, except it didn't even get close to those ratings in my experience, unfortunately. So I've been driving this vehicle now about 95 miles, and in that time I've gotten 16 mpg. And honestly, I did a little bit of highway driving. I didn't do a lot of highway driving, because that certainly dragged it down. But still, it's rated at 19 in the city, which means if I'm doing stop and go, grueling city commuting, I should be getting 19 mpg. I'm doing relaxed backroads cruising at 35 miles an hour most of the time in my week with these vehicles, and I'm still getting 3 less than the city rating. I mean, yes, I know it's heavy and it's a twin turbo V6 and it does have a lot of power, but I mean, that's kind of low. Again, most people probably don't care about fuel economy that they're buying one of these, but whenever you're filling up this thing and daily driving it, I mean, you don't have a lot of range either. I mean, I'm now, like I said, 95 miles of driving, and I'm barely over a half tank of gas. Now, obviously, if you're cruising on the highway, you'll have longer range, and it's still quoting me another 191 miles of range to go. But I don't know. I mean, the way the gas gauge is going down, I'm only looking at maybe a little over 200 miles on its per tank. And just keep in mind, you'll be filling up a lot in this thing. But I think, even if you do spend more money on gas than you do on some of the competitors, you'll save so much more money with the purchase price of this vehicle. That's the last thing to mention is the pricing, which Genesis, in their typical usual fashion, knocks it out of the park and is hands down the absolute best value, no matter how you look at it. This is a fantastic bargain compared to the other competitors. So this one, as tested, the fully loaded, maxed out, like you can't add any more options onto this car, is $64,000. These start, I mean, if you want a regular GV70 with the 2.5 turbo motor, I mean, those start at only $42,000, and you get a lot of the same interior for that money. Even like going up to a mid-grade Selectrum of a GV70 with the 2.5T motor, those are only like 46.5, and you still get a panoramic roof, you get heated and cooled seats, this huge screen, all these amazing features still, and all the same luxury stuff in here for mid 40,000s, which is just crazy. But anyway, even this one, 64 fully loaded, still undercuts all of its competitors. The X3 M40i is the next closest competitor, and those, with all the stuff you get on this, and you honestly can't even get some of the stuff that you get on this, but with it being as closely configured as possible, those are $68,000. Go up to an SQ5, for example. Those are going to also be about $69,000 for a comparable model. And so, I mean, we're talking $5,000 there. Again, these are expensive vehicles. Maybe $5,000 is not a big deal to you to have the Audi badge. But I mean, if you want like a Mercedes GLC 43, though, that has everything this has, $77,000. So we are talking, $13,000 more. I mean, even as someone who's loaded, $13,000 isn't chump change. You got to really love the Mercedes brand in order to spend an extra $13,000 over this. And honestly, this is much smoother. Yes, the GLC 43 might handle a tiny bit better. It might have a slightly more aggressive launch from a stop with its 9-speed auto, has one extra gear to play with than this 8-speed does. Little things. And in a lot of ways, this is an upgrade over the current GLC generation, since that's just so old and outdated. It's been out forever. We're still waiting on the new one here in 2021. So in the meantime, I mean, it's just a no-brainer that this is just so nice. This is the freshest competitor out there, and all the other German stuff is just kind of stale at this point in a lot of ways, and this isn't. And so I think hopefully that'll help sell a lot of these on its own. But I think this vehicle, I mean, like I said, it looks fantastic. It drives fantastic. Handling would be a lot better with better tires, but even still, it's a really good handler. It has all the bases covered. Genesis made sure that every single thing they did at least as good as, not if not better than, all the competitors as far as features and pricing, all that kind of stuff. And then add on to that the 10-year 100,000 mile powertrain warranty that you get with the Genesis, that the Germans only give you half a warranty. They're like 60,000 miles, 5 years for those instead. So I mean, if you're leasing these luxury vehicles, doesn't matter to you. But if you're someone who actually buys your luxury vehicle, I would hands down any day rather have the Genesis with its 10-year warranty. So I think you have a lot more peace of mind there if you are someone who actually plans to keep your luxury vehicle longer than the 3-year lease period. Even if you do lease them, it's a fantastic bargain. But even if you don't, I think it just sweetens the deal even more. But yeah, so that's about all of my thoughts here on the GV70. I can't praise it enough. I think it's fantastic. I love the Genesis is just giving 110%. It's really refreshing, with a lot of the other stuff being just more and more of the status quo, little incremental changes, little evolutionary design changes, nothing too much to rock the boat. This is rocking the boat. This is, hey, let's give you crazy color combinations, let's give you crazy features, crazy luxury, let's be bold, let's be daring, let's, wake up this whole segment in a way, and I love that Genesis is doing that. And so yeah, we'll have to wait and see how the sales numbers shake out, but I think the Genesis GV70 here is going to be a huge hit, and I've already seen a few of them in my area here, and I'm sure I'll see many, many more to go along with all the GV80s I'm starting to see rolling around. I think Genesis is really starting to hit their stride here with all these new products, and people are starting to take notice, not only just by the looks, but the interiors and the value. So yeah, can't beat it, I think, in my opinion. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on the GV70 in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.